Hey y'all, and welcome back to Carbon Scoring, the best place for comics history and action figures. We're doing another mystery box, but this one's going to be a little bit different today because I just got back from watching the premiere of Spider-Man No Way Home, and let me tell you, that movie was absolute perfection. It took 20 years of Spider-Man movies and brought them all together and gave us such an incredible, resounding, heartfelt finish to so many stories. So many characters got their redemption in this movie. It just was incredible. It was a tight movie. I laughed, I cheered out loud in the theater, and I gotta admit, there were a couple of times where I actually had tears brought to my eyes. So we're gonna talk about Spider-Man Far From Home through the history of action figures, but we're gonna do it in a spoiler-free way. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, don't worry, you can still enjoy this video. If you have seen the movie, it's going to mean that much more to you because we're going to get into a little bit of characterization, but not into plot points. So we're not going to spoil the movie, but we are going to talk about it. And we're going to begin by looking at some of these figures of the different Spider-Men over time. Now, we're not going to spoil the movie during this discussion, but I would love for you guys to leave some comments about your favorite parts of Spider-Man No Way Home. That movie was so incredible, and I want to get into a discussion with this community about it because I love Spider-Man, and I know that you guys love Spider-Man, so I can't wait to share it with you. And I read all of your comments, every single one. In fact, I read them so much that one of the things that you say to me is, why don't we ever see any of your Hot Toys figures? Well, today we're going to start out by fixing that problem and looking at Spider-Man's history through Hot Toys. So I don't think it's a big spoiler to say that both Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland all appear in the film. We'll just go ahead and admit that that does happen. But let's take a look at these guys and see exactly what we have. So let's begin with this ancient Toy Biz figure, this ancient 12-inch Toy Biz cloth costumed Tobey Maguire figure. It's actually got pretty good articulation for something that you could have purchased at Walmart. You can see the red is beginning to fade since it is 19 years old. And this mask, this rubberized mask, is removable. And there's a Tobey Maguire head underneath. I'm a little hesitant to take it off. You can see that the rubber's already starting to crack a little bit, and I'm afraid that if I do that, it's going to tear and rip the material. So you'll just have to trust me that Tobey Maguire does exist underneath this costume. But next comes probably the first Hot Toys figure that I ever bought, and that was the Spider-Man 1 figure from the first Sam Raimi Tobey Maguire movie. And what a beauty. Look at how the raised pattern with the webs, you can even see kind of the mesh of the suit. Great reflective eyes on this one. Super detailed spider on the back. Again, all of the detail in the blue of the suit is there. You're going to get all of what you expect from a Hot Toys articulation. Actually, that has got the clickable joints, so it really kind of holds in place, and you can get him into some of these super incredible Spider-Man poses. The only negative, and I've seen this a lot discussing this figure, is the neck. They made the mask one piece with the rest of the costume, and you kind of lose his jawline a little bit because of that. It's not so bad if you're looking at it straight on, but when you get into some of the other poses or you move his head, you can kind of see that. And we'll see how they fixed this with later versions of the figure. So I did not buy the black suit version. I only got this version. So this is the only Tobey Maguire Hot Toy that I have. But then when Andrew Garfield took over the role, we got this costume. Now this one is actually, I think, from the Medicom Real Action Heroes line. So this isn't a Hot Toy. We'll see the Hot Toy next. The one thing that I really loved about Andrew Garfield's costume was how bright the blue was. That really popped and looked much more like the comic. Kind of cool Spidey on the back. This suit bunches up a little bit. It's a little crinkly. Really great head sculpt though. And you can see what they did here was the costume goes up to the neck, but then the head is a solid piece of plastic. I didn't love the gold eyes that Andrew Garfield had in that first movie, and I didn't love kind of the super sleek suit. I liked the colors, but other than that, this was probably, I don't like that. This was probably my least favorite Spider-Man suit from the movies. Here's the Hot Toys version, and while I think maybe I like the physique and the shape of the Metacom one better, the Hot Toys is a better product. I mean, look at how much more detail goes through the blue. You can see some of the piping along there. All of that mesh is in place. And of course, this sculpt, this figure came with an Andrew Garfield head sculpt. And that's the one that I've chosen to display with this version. So, not great. It's funny because I think this was color-wise good, but design-wise a departure from Spidey's classic comic suit. But then Amazing Spider-Man 2, Andrew Garfield's second movie, had probably the most accurate, the most comic-accurate Spidey suit that they've made. So then we move forward into the Tom Holland years, and of course we begin with his homemade suit. Now, Hot Toys is really on their game at this point. He's got his socks, his tube socks pulled all the way up with his sneakers on. This is purposefully baggy because it's really just, a couple of sweatshirts on top of each other. One of the things I love is if you look at this spider symbol, it is not symmetrical. It is in no way symmetrical. And that makes it have that feel of being just hand-drawn with a Sharpie over the top of a hoodie. Now here they've got, again, the neck kind of comes all the way up, but it's not as noticeable with the hoodie on. I love the handmade goggles, and look at all of this detail in the web shooters that Hot Toys has put into this, even all the way down to, you can see the mechanics with him pressing his fingers up against it. And here's a close-up shot of his web shooter in his hand. Oh, that is so nice with all of that intricate detail and paint detail on that one. So really, right off the bat, absolutely fantastic figure. Maybe my favorite costume out of all of these was the Spider-Man Homecoming costume, because I really think that it captures the look of the comics very well. I'm not as put off by some of this black. I know that the spider on his chest is like a little electronic thing, and that this is more of a Stark Tech suit. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about how that plays into the film as we go along, looking at other figures. Again, really nice detail on these web shooters. Look at all of that detail on the hand. Here is where they solved the mask problem. So with this figure, the bodysuit goes up underneath the neck, and this is cloth. This mask on his face is cloth, but it's its own separate piece. And so it manages for him to really, really look great and not quite so frumpy as the other one. Now, I've had this guy in a pose for quite some time, so he's got a little bit of bunching at his knees. But maybe my favorite part of this outfit is that Ditko-looking spider on the back. Most all of the other spiders all kind of had this sort of design on it. You can see they took that here as well. That is such a comic Steve Ditko-looking spider symbol on the back. So that's one of the things that makes this particular version of Spidey my favorite. And then when we're talking about just absolutely pure fun, who on earth can deny how great Night Monkey is? These goggles they have a mechanism where you have to be very careful with them, as you have to be with all Hot Toys figures, but they do flip up, as you can see, and you can see the painted and detailed Tom Holland eyes underneath. You actually really can see that. That looks like Tom Holland right there. There's not as much going on with this particular costume. It's more of a shield sort of tech suit. I mean, this could be any number of, shield agent out in the field. Again, they didn't skimp at the levels of the web shooters. They gave us good stuff there. He's got a cool belt, but really cool. So this is kind of a abbreviated history in 12-inch form of Spider-Man. And let me tell you, we should be getting some unbelievable Spideys coming up from No Way Home. So let's switch gears and now look at some of the 6-inch figures across the history of Spidey in the movies. Okay, guys, like I said, we're going to do this a little bit differently today. Typically, with our mystery boxes, we just have a giant Tupperware box of figures and we go through one at a time and talk about them. But because I really want to paint the picture of the history of Spider-Man in cinema. I've gone ahead and taken these out and kind of gotten them organized so that I can tell you the story in a pretty cohesive way. So with that said, I think we all know from the trailer, you've got the 5 main bad guys that you saw in the trailer. You got Doc Ock, Sandman, Electro, Jonah doesn't count, Lizard, and Green Goblin. And then we've got Spideys from all of the different eras. So why don't we go ahead and start right here with the Spider-Man that we just got for No Way Home. And we'll start with the accessory characters. So here is the Doctor Strange from No Way Home. It's a really great rendition of Benedict Cumberbatch. He's got his amulet. He has a very, very comic-looking tunic on. I love the red and the blue colors. You know, one of my few criticisms of the Spider-Man movies is they've kind of been more Marvel team-up sort of movies, in that the first movie was Spider-Man and Iron Man. And then the second movie, Far From Home, was Spider-Man and Nick Fury. And I was afraid when we saw all the promos and you knew that Doctor Strange was going to have to be really integrated into this story, that it was going to be another Marvel team-up of Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. But it really didn't turn out that way. Obviously, Strange is a key figure. He figures out throughout the entire film, but this is a Spider-Man movie. It is not a Marvel team-up movie, but a really good Doctor Strange to begin with. Our other accessory character that we got in our recent line was J Jonah Jameson, played by the absolutely brilliant J.K. Simmons, who originated the role of J Jonah Jameson all the way back in 2002 with the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie. Now, I have to admit, when I first saw this JJ, I was kind of like, what? Why on earth do we have a bald J. Jonah Jameson? I mean, one of JJ's most defining features is that 1950s flat top haircut that he has. But when you see the movie and you realize that there are people coming from different universes, that it's very much a multiverse movie, you realize that they needed to make the actor and the character distinct from his previous incarnation. He can't help it that he was the perfect J. Jonah Jameson in those earlier movies. He is equally awesome in this movie. There will be some people who say there wasn't enough JJ, but, you know, there was a lot going on in this movie. They managed to keep it really tight. I think that he was just enough spice to really keep things going. Then, you guys might have been exactly like me when the promo pictures came out and you saw we're getting 3 different Spider-Man costumes in the first wave of No Way Home figures. You've got this black costume that, you know, looks super gimmicky. You've got another kind of Stark Tech costume with the gold on it. Not a big fan of the Iron Spider costumes. I really like my Spider-Man looking much more classic like this. So when I saw that, I was like, oh man, they're going to cram in multiple costumes just for the purpose of selling toys. And I've got to tell you guys, after seeing the movie, that's absolutely not what happens. First of all, this suit, which is kind of a cool action figure, I guess, wait till you see it. It does not look anything like this in the movie. And in fact, the way that they utilized this suit in the movie is so good and is so down on his luck Peter Parker. I mean, it is just classic Parker luck that ends up with him in a dark costume. Don't get confused. We will have to see another version of this suit that's going to have much more detail, much more screen accurate. I think that we'll get this suit from some of our import makers like Mafex and whatnot, and it is going to be so cool. Then this was kind of the final suit. And again, one of the things that, well, not quite the final suit. Wait till you see the movie. But they're, I kind of get tired of some of the Stark Tech, but they made it make sense. And they made it integral to the storyline. So once Spidey was in this suit, I really didn't mind it at all. And most of the time, he looked like this. And by looked like this, I mean, it really was Tom Holland's head wearing the suit that really was mostly the Far From Home suit. And great figure. I'm a traditionalist, but I do like that white spider on the back. This figure has terrific articulation. And a super, super accurate Tom Holland head sculpt. For a $20 to $22 figure, to have this, look at from every angle, that is Tom Holland. His hair, his chin, his jawline, that kind of half, he's a British actor and he's playing with an American accent, and sometimes he kind of crunches his mouth up when he talks. You can see it. You can see how he kind of crunches up his mouth even on the sculpt of this figure. This is an import-worthy head sculpt that we got on this figure, and I love it. And we'll talk more about who Peter Parker is and how being Peter Parker was such an integral part of this movie. I'm so glad that we got this figure with the Peter head sculpt. So before we get into our legacy Spider-Man figures, let's talk a little bit about the bad guys that were in the film. Because like most good Marvel movies, the bad guys aren't always bad. They sometimes have different motivations for what they're doing. Never is that more apparent than with Otto Octavius or Doc Ock. A lot of people, myself included, will argue that the second Raimi film, Spider-Man 2, with Doc Ock may be the absolute finest one in the series. And the real reason for that was Alfred Molina's portrayal of Octavius. He gave Ock real motivation. He made sense, and his transformation from, scientist into, the bad guy of the movie was plausible, and you could understand it. And they carry that thread line through No Way Home. And Ock is really one of the most compelling figures that we see. You guys all saw him in the trailer where he says, "Hello, Peter." And Molina was just absolutely brilliant. His haircut looked a little bit wonky, but Doc Ock's not exactly known for fashion. I'm looking forward to a line where we actually get Octavius with a shirt on. I imagine Alfred Molina's family is probably looking forward to a figure with his shirt on. But these both came from back in the Toy Biz days. They're really nice. They have extremely stable, and again, these things are almost 20 years old at this point, but they've still got really stable arms. They've got really stable arms, he says, as it falls out of the costume, but it does still bend really nicely. So Octavius is a huge player in the movie. Another kind of mistaken villain was Flint Marko. So as you guys remember, Flint Marko, the Sandman, was part of the gobbledygook that was the third Spider-Man movie. Just a lot going on in that third Raimi movie, trying to get Venom and, New Goblin, Hobgoblin, and Sandman in there. And Sandman's story was actually really one of the more compelling and touching aspects. He really just kind of wanted to be with his daughter. And, here's the Build-A-Figure from that relatively difficult to find 6-inch line back from the Spider-Man 3 release. They play upon that. And Sandman has kind of that same motivation throughout this film, and he is very compelling, and so they do a great job and a great service to him. Again, like I said earlier in this video, there is a lot of redemption that happens in this movie. It is amazing that they're able to tighten up 20 years of storyline, but they do it in such a great way, such an organic, such a way that makes absolute sense. Now, I am not the biggest fan of the Andrew Garfield movies. You guys have heard me say that before, and I love y'all. I love my Garfield supporters out there. You are so proud to be Andrew Garfield fans, and you really shout it from the rooftops in the comments, and keep them coming. But Andrew Garfield's villains were a little bit on the doofy side. In fact, that actually makes its way into the film. He gets jabbed at a little bit by the other Spider-Men for the quality of his villains. Now, one of them, of course, was Electro, and Electro in the film version of Amazing Spider-Man did not look anything like the comic version of Electro. Well, let me tell you, they rectified that in No Way Home. Electro is still very much this character, still Jamie Foxx, who really brings a ton of personality to the screen, and his banter and his interaction with the other characters is one of the things that really keeps the movie going. But they also give him a much more comic classic look, which makes me, as a Steve Ditko disciple, very happy. So we've got this one, but hopefully we'll be getting a much more screen accurate version soon. Hard to know what to do with the Lizard. He is in there. I think he's in there enough. I think that they didn't overplay the Lizard. He was a good foil for Andrew Garfield's character. It was good to have him. You know, the Lizard and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, they really got shafted because when that first Amazing Spider-Man movie came out, it was during the time frame where Marvel Legends was kind of on hiatus with Hasbro. And so the only figure that we got was this Marvel Select 7-inch version. Now, because the Lizard's a giant monster, it works really well. So, I mean, you can fit this into any display because his size discrepancy doesn't take away from that. And, you know, that's pretty much what he looks like. It's pretty sweet. But Lizard certainly does his part in the movie. And then lastly, we have actor Willem Dafoe playing Norman Osborn. And you want to talk about chewing up some screen time. I can't wait to hear you guys' thoughts on his portrayal of Norman Osborn. And, you know, we talk about a redemption story. Not everybody deserves to be redeemed. And in this film, we certainly saw why the Green Goblin was and is and will always remain Spider-Man's #1 enemy. The most tear-jerking scene certainly revolved around the Green Goblin. These Toy Biz figures from back in the day are just spectacular. Look at how great that metallic paint is and the way that the color bounces off of them. They did make this one, which was like a battle damaged version, so he was a little bit darker. Not quite. I don't like this one as much because it just it looks a little bit blah compared to him. But then probably my favorite is this superposable Green Goblin. He came with his Goblin glider, but what makes this figure so special is the Willem Dafoe head sculpt underneath. You actually can take his Goblin mask off and you get a really, really well done Willem Dafoe sculpt right there underneath. Actually, this is just a slightly different version. Not quite as glossy. Look at what a difference it makes to have the metallic paint compared to the flat paint. I think this was a later reissue, but here's the original. Here's the 2002 original, and it just absolutely pops. Just fantastic. So we've talked about some of the bad guys. Let's talk about our good guys, our Spider-Men. And I was excited. You guys, I posted a poll on my YouTube page. Over 800 votes on who is the best Spider-Man. And like I said, there are some real Andrew Garfield lovers out there. And I'm so proud of you guys for making your voices known. He ended up with 20% of the vote, which is, pretty good. I actually thought that was right around where he would end up. Then I was shocked. I was truly shocked by the results because I'm team Tom Holland. And after seeing No Way Home, I'm absolutely team Tom Holland. 60% of the vote went to Tobey Maguire. So it was 60, 20, 20. So you guys loud and clear said that Tobey Maguire was the best Spider-Man. 60% of you are wrong because it's Tom Holland, but I have to listen to you in that you love Tobey Maguire. No matter who your favorite Spider-Man is, you're going to be happy with this film because you all get your moments. There are moments of true Spidey Peter Parker from each of these characters in the movie, and it's just amazing. Let's start by looking at some figures of Tobey Maguire, and let's go to the beginning. So, unfortunately, this is the only full Peter Parker figure that we've gotten, and it's really good. I mean, he's in his classic, shirt and blue jeans. It's a pretty decent head sculpt. It pretty much looks like Tobey back at the time. He's got a backpack that is kind of squishy, but I would have loved to have seen, more. I would love to see Peter Parker figures from across the entire line. And then we saw, because that movie gave us a great origin story, here is the wrestler version of Peter Parker, Spider-Man. Really cool. And of course, this one, you can take this costume off and convert him. You can switch out the feet, switch out the arms, and convert him into Spider-Man. So you can take him from his opening wrestler suit all the way up. And of course, you know that that suit was very much an inspiration for this suit in Spider-Man Homecoming. You can see the parallels that are created there. Then we get into the great Toy Biz figures. I only pulled out a few because there are more Toy Biz Tobey Maguire figures than all of these combined, because they made so many with different play features, and they would shoot out a web missile or the arms would box or whatever. But I just pulled out some of the very best ones, starting with kind of the battle damaged Tobey Maguire. Again, you know, at this point, you're not talking about a magic Stark Tech nanotech costume. So to get the actor's face off, he either had to rip the mask off or it had to get shredded so that you could actually see the actor emote. And so they used that to good effect in the first movie, particularly in the final battle scene between Spidey and the Green Goblin. Here's another first movie version. I think he's got got a little punchy hands there, but he's got that same Toby head sculpt. Again, you know, this was back in the day when Marvel Legends was just getting started, so it wasn't unusual to see these funky, you know, V hips. These are not ball jointed shoulders. They only go up and down. And of course, these were meant for kids. These were not really for adult collectors at that time. That market hadn't really exploded to that point yet. One more in that same vein. Again, you can see, I picked this out because it's got basically pre-posed hips. I mean, this figure is going to go in kind of this stance and this stance only. So, you know, his torso is already sculpted in a contorting way. You can move his head to look forward, but it doesn't work. He's only really meant to look that way. So just to give you an idea of how far we've come with action figures. But when we talk about that, certainly one of the granddaddies of them all, the figures that really made a difference and took mass market figures to a new height, was the first Spider-Man figure, the first superposable Spider-Man figure. This thing has over 30 points of articulation, double knees, double elbows, you know, ball hips. Things that we take for granted now were all brand new at the time. And it did it with a level of sculpting detail that was just unprecedented in a 6-inch figure. I mean, look at that spider. Look at every single notch on the costume. The web lines are raised and are painted. I mean, they won't even put a wash on this figure to get the web lines. Every single one of these silver web lines is raised and painted all the way around the figure. This is a masterpiece. This is a 2002 masterpiece. To say that this figure is 20 years old and still stands up today is just, it just pales in comparison. You've got articulated fingers so that he can make his thwippy hands just perfect, just absolutely perfect, until they made it better. And that was with the Spider-Man 2 superposable. Now, this came in two different versions. I picked specifically the magnetized version. So this one has magnets on his hands and on his feet, but the body is essentially the same as the non-magnetized version. So for this, you get all of that same articulation, all of that same level of sculpting and paint detail all the way through the back, but you've got new butterfly joints at the shoulders, which allows for more movement there. You have a much larger ability to twist at the waist. You started with these funky Toy Biz ball hip joints. I gotta say, those have never been my favorite, but again, they were never afraid to innovate, and they took a great figure and actually made it just a little bit greater. So here's to you, the 60% of people that voted Tobey Maguire as the best Spider-Man. Now, like I said, poor old Andrew Garfield, he kind of got the short end of the stick all the way around. I mean, he only got 2 movies. Everybody else got 3. And he definitely has the least amount of action figures, you know, from that. Here is a Marvel 6-inch figure from the first Spider-Man movie. I've talked about how I love the colors. I love how the blue pops. And that's about it. I don't like the gold eyes. I don't like kind of this sleek, almost like racer, almost like a motorcycle racer suit that he has. This has got kind of basic articulation for the time. Kind of, Now, what did come out great, though, for that first Spider-Man movie were the Marvel Select figures. So again, these are 7-inch scale. And with that extra inch, look at how much more detail was able to be afforded to these figures. There was the regular version with the Spidey mask, and that mask does look really good. Again, raised painted web lines, all the detail all the way down. But then you also had an exclusive Andrew Garfield head, which is just terrific. You could pop off these arms so that you could see his arms and his web shooters. We didn't mention any web shooters on Tobey Maguire because he had organic web shooters. I wonder if that comes up in the movie. I wonder if there's any discussion of that at all. I am super glad, though, that we have versions of all 3 of these guys with their mask off, because one of the things that I absolutely loved about No Way Home was when the Parkers got together, they used their number one superpower, which was their brains. These guys, one of the things that makes Peter Parker special is that he was special before the spider bit him. It is such a core part of his character that his intelligence and his heart shine through, and they made that happen in this movie. And they really did it by contrasting and comparing the 3 different Peters and showing how very alike they are and how incredibly intelligent and full of heart they are. Spider-Man 2 had a much more traditional Spider-Man costume. Honestly, this is a movie figure, but if you stuck this on a comic shelf, unless you turned it around and looked at that spider on the back, that would fit in absolutely perfectly on a comic shelf. We got a Marvel Legend, but again, the better figure was the Marvel Select. Just that larger scale allowed for more detail, more perfection in the paint apps, and just a really, really solid figure. I do have one surprise, though. I actually dug this up the other day. I have never opened this, but this is the Mafex Amazing Spider-Man figure from Spider-Man 2. And it's kind of wonky because he's like super glittery. And it doesn't really look like what the figure in the movie looked like, but look at all the things it comes with. It's got a really accurate Andrew Garfield head sculpt, multiple heads. He's got like his fireman's hat and all the different accessories. But I have had this and it's been in storage because I don't love it, but it is really kind of an impressive piece. So I wanted to show you that I like Andrew Garfield too. Even though I give him a hard time, I still like him very much. But now let's move on to my favorite Spider-Man, Tom Holland. And we'll go kind of chronologically through this. So Tom Holland's Spider-Man has been the beneficiary of course, being the most recent Spider-Man, which means he has some of the greatest offerings of figures that we have seen. Look at how incredible this Mafex homemade suit is. Just the ability to get all of these super cool poses. He's so like thin and lithe. And one of the reasons why I really love Tom Holland as Spider-Man is, Tom Holland trained as a gymnast. And so I think that his frame, his figure just looks like what I picture Spider-Man to look like. You guys may disagree with me. I have to say Tobey Maguire looked really good, kind of being the senior statesman of the Peter Parkers. He's super fit in this movie and looks great. Andrew Garfield, I've always felt like he just was kind of too tall. He just looked sort of too lanky, whereas, it's kind of like Goldilocks. I think Tom Holland is just right. And you can see that in these terrific import figures from Mafex. So here is the regular suit from Homecoming, and unbelievable detail. Great ability to get into all of those super cool Spidey poses. Of course, these figures come with multiple hands, multiple feet, different masks, different eyes, I think, but just really, really, really terrific stuff. But hey, it's not like Hasbro didn't come up with some pretty great stuff as well. Now, I will admit, this is maybe not their strongest offering. Their homemade suit's a little bit on the plain side, but, they stepped it up with the regular suit. Pretty good. This actually came with 2 different heads and has great articulation, so that's pretty good. And then we move to the Diamond Select. You know, Diamond Select, Marvel Select really has kind of killed it with these Spider-Man movie figures. I mean, look at how good this one is. Again, I mean, this thing compares favorably to some of those import figures. I wish that it was in the 6-inch scale because it's really hard to put this in your display at 7 inches. But, you know, we do have enough of them that we can kind of, you know, put them together, put him with the Garfield ones, but that's really cool. But I wanted to show you one more from Homecoming that's kind of been forgotten, and it's maybe the best of all of the Spider-Man Homecoming figures, and that's the Mezco 112 version. So this is a full, like, cloth, rubbery costume all the way around on this Spider-Man figure. Now, he's got a plastic head, which works because it's hard to do that costume. But yeah, he's got this really cool rubbery costume. You know, Mafex tends to take a lot of liberties with their Marvel figures, kind of give them a little bit of a different design, but they played it really straight with this Homecoming figure, and man, it is a winner. I love the web effect that he came with. I think that looks great, and just the scale and proportion is spot on target, so super cool. Then we move into some of the other movies. I mentioned how much I don't really love the Stark Tech version. Here is Tobey Maguire head. Not as good as the head we just got. Kind of a weaker version. But we got some fun ones. You know, we do have my main man, Night Monkey. And his thing doesn't come down the way the Hot Toys does, but still a pretty cool character. And this was the one from the Mysterio battle, right? I think this is what he was wearing in Far From Home. This is the suit that I guess he made with Happy on the helicarrier type of thing. And then I'm going to finish with another Mafex figure. And this should be this is the advanced suit. So this, I think, was in Far From Home, but then is the suit that carried over into No Way Home. And just, again, such beauty with this thing. So many great poses, so much ability to get him into all of those spidery looks. Maybe a little bit limited at the torso, but there's just so much else that goes along with this. So guys, I loved Spider-Man No Way Home. Tell me about it in the comments. Let's talk about this thing. Let's go through this. And listen, if you love Spider-Man the way I love Spider-Man, hit subscribe, hit that notification bell, give me a like, because I really love making these videos and I want to keep making them. And I want to keep talking about Spider-Man and going through these toys and these action figures and all of this history. And hey, listen, finish watching my video, maybe watch 5 or 6 more of my videos, and then go out and see Spider-Man No Way From Home. You will not be disappointed. So until next time, Peter Tingle out.